different, but that's the new world, I suppose. And hello, and welcome to everyone who's joining us physically today in London at the Norton Rose Fulbright offices, and to everyone who's joining us virtually as well. And welcome, crucially, to the first Women in Summit, our very first cross-transport event, which is extremely exciting. I'm Daisy Chapman Chamberlain. I am the rail lead at KTN, and I'm also the vice chair of ITS UK's Inclusive Mobility Forum. And for any of you who don't know us, KTN is the UK's innovation networking agency. So we provide everything from funding support to innovators, companies of all sizes, and academics. And we make connections across industries from agriculture to water, digital, and of course into transport, which is why we are here today. And a key focus for us is, of course, diversity and inclusion, with that real need to boost inclusion and boost diversity across transport, across all our sectors and into infrastructure as well, which is why we're here today. So thank you so much for joining us. And to get us started, I will hand over to Chrissy Clark at Maritime UK.
Thank you, Daisy. Good morning, everyone. I am so excited to be here today for our first Women in Summit, as Daisy said. My name is Chrissy Clark, and I'm the Head of Diversity and Operations at Maritime UK. Welcome. We've got an action-packed agenda for you this morning. We've got a fabulous keynote from Nusrat Ghani. We're delighted to have her here. We'll kickstart today with a panel session. So please, for you in the virtual audience, come primed with your questions. Please do feel free to use the chat function, and we'll come to you. We'll then move into breakout rooms. For everyone in the virtual audience, we're going to tell you what those breakout rooms are. You'll have the opportunity to go to 3 different breakout rooms during this session. And I must not forget, we are so grateful to our sponsors for making today possible. Norton Rose Fulbright and the Board of Exchange. I'm going to stop talking and let the session begin. So I'm first of all going to introduce Christine Escatori, and apologies if I pronounce that wrong, who is the global head of transport and Norton Rose Fulbright, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we are really delighted to welcome you today and to host this session on breaking barriers for gender diversity. And Norton Rose Fulbright, diversity and inclusion is a key business priority. It is not a new trend. I've been with the firm for about 20 years, even more. And even when I joined, tackling gender issue was already on top of the agenda. We have set ourselves ambitious targets, and we want to achieve a gender balance at all levels. In 2014, the firm set a global goal of reaching 30% representation of women across our management committees and partnership by 2020. Where are we? We have achieved this in our management committees, since our global executive committee contains more than 40% women. We have 37% of women in our global supervisory board, and 33% of the management of EMEA are women. In the partnership, we have achieved 27%, so not so great, but still making progress. And one of our success stories has been the setup of a career strategy program. We set that up in 2010, and it has contributed to an increased number of female partners. And it's the way it works is that we identify talents earlier on, and we then try to give them tools to make progress and go through the process. So this is all positive, but we know we've got a lot of work to do. Networking, mentoring is also key. I can only encourage any woman to join associations such as Vista in Shipping, or internal network. We've got one called Women in Red, which is for clients and which is very successful in some jurisdiction more than others, but it's really a key topic, and get connected. Because not only we need to change the process, the policies, and getting people, to train people, to promote women, but we also need to change the mindset, and that's probably the most difficult part. It doesn't matter whether you are a junior or whether you are more senior. We all face the same issues. So stay on alert. And on this note, I wish you all a very good session.
so much, and thank you so much again to Norton Rose for providing this fantastic venue for us today. I'm now delighted to introduce Nusrat Ghani, who has been a fantastic supporter of women in maritime, and on an international stage in London International Shipping Week, where women in maritime was first launched. It feels no better time to invite her back as a keynote. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you to Norton Rose Fulbright for hosting today's event. And it's a pleasure to speak at this incredible first of its kind Women's Summit. And it's a topic that's very close to all of our hearts. As we all know, over the last couple of years, diversity has become somewhat of a buzzword, a catch-all phrase we see on the top of our HR documents or in the headlines of our papers in the aftermath of huge societal events like BLM or Me Too. But for me and for most of you, diversity is not a side issue to be relegated to a box-ticking exercise or an occasional story. It's not even solely a woman's issue or a disability issue, a maritime, aviation or transport issue. It's fundamentally, economically and morally an issue of success or failure for the sectors that we want to champion. There are two reasons for this. First, diversity leads to more creative thinking and reduces the risk of groupthink and bias, which leads to better economic outcomes. Secondly, it's just the right thing to do to reflect the society we live in and also the communities we wish to serve. Perhaps it may be helpful to speak from my own experience. In Parliament, I have the same experiences of most women in this room. I work extensively in a male-dominated environment where the programmes of work and decision-making processes are heavily weighted to men and their networks. And when you receive a position of authority, in many cases, you're the only woman to have ever held that role. And you're the only woman ever in that room going forward. And in my case, in 2018, when I was made the Maritime Minister, I was the country's first ever Muslim woman minister to speak at the House of Commons dispatch box. It's remarkable that in 2018, we're having first, let alone in one of the oldest parliaments in the world. And I do not doubt that many women in this room will also be history makers in the roles that they're undertaking. What's extraordinary about picking up the brief as Transport Minister, once again, the industries that I was representing or overseeing basically employed men. And I was keen with the power, the small amount of power that I had, to try and change that. I was so pleased to launch Women in Maritime Pledge. I landed the world's first transport and accessibility programme, which made a huge difference to the lives of women. I secured significant funding for the Maritime and Me campaign and oversaw Europe's largest construction project, HS2, where I wanted to make sure we were encouraging women and girls to take up engineering and design jobs in rail and road. As a side, like most women in this room, when I was juggling HS2, maritime and accessibility, it was a brief that I held solely as a woman. Every other time someone has held that job, it's been a man, and the brief has been split amongst many men. So once again, no doubt the women will understand the cliche about men cannot multitask, but us women can. And as the Minister for the Year of Engineering, I'm sure that we focused on young girls, especially those from deprived backgrounds, making sure that they were encouraged to take up jobs in the sectors that we represent here today. We exceeded our goals and reached over 1 million young people, and we secured a whole range of unlikely partnerships and hammered home the point that engineering or maritime, aviation, rail and road is not a boys' job. It's a career for everyone, regardless of where they come from. I'm afraid it has to be an ongoing campaign, and we need to reach people in their formative years. And for many of us in this room, it's also making sure that women are not blocked in the later stages of their careers, ensuring they get a seat at the top table. The reason why today is so important, it helps us to create those connections that the boys' network have relied on for generations. A couple of years ago, when I was managing the engineering brief, I met a wonderful woman, Dr. Hayatun Silem. She's the CEO of the Royal Academy of Engineering and the first woman and BAME person to hold that role. She phrased it perfectly when she said, we suffer from a real long-standing diversity deficit. As she noted, back in 2019, only 12% of the UK's engineering workforce were women, and now it's only about 14.5%. That's really not good enough. These are the people who will be building the physical and digital world around us,
Do we really want to continue to build a world that excludes us women by accident? So we've got a lifetime of work ahead of us. Let me explain how this can become full circle if we rely on others in authority or even rely on men to help us through the tough times. Long before I came to Westminster, I was working for the BBC World Service. Around 20 years ago, I was in Kabul and I decided to train the first female voices to speak on the floor of the Afghan parliament. There hadn't been a voice spoken for 17 years under the Taliban. Over the last few weeks and months, I've been contacted by 69, or one of the 69, of the female MPs who were then elected to office. Remember, it took 20 years and 17 years previously, so that's quite a substantial amount of time to get women elected to office. And one of the tasks I and my team had was try and extract these women, these female parliamentarians, out of Afghanistan before they were killed by the Taliban. What's extraordinary is that these women had risen to the most senior jobs in their country. And what isn't extraordinary is that the men left and the women were made to stay behind. So even when you get to the top of your career, it's remarkable how the men can protect themselves and continue in opportunities, and the women are left fighting for their lives. So the job is never over in ensuring that we get women into those positions of authority and then make sure that they're protected once they are there. It reminds me of a Michelle Obama quote: "I wish that girls could fail as bad as men do and still be okay. Because let me tell you, watching men fail up is frustrating. It's frustrating to see a lot of men blow it and win. And from those of us, whether we're from any sort of diverse background, we know we only get one chance of success and we've got to nail it." Anyhow, that's a bit about my personal stories and a reflection on what's been happening outside of London International Shipping Week over the last few weeks. Getting back to the two principal points. First, about encouraging diversity to counter groupthink and bias, and the second about making the right choice to reflect a diverse society. Let's look at the data. It will come as no surprise to any of us in this room that COVID impacted women and minorities disproportionately hard. A United Nations assessment highlighted that compounded economic impacts are felt especially by women and girls who are generally earning less, saving less, and holding insecure jobs or living close to poverty. A different report found women make up 39% of the global employment, but account for 54% of overall job losses due to the pandemic. Many women and girls will be working as unpaid carers whilst they're holding down jobs too. So one of the arguments I hope that we can make broadly and during this week is that in the wake of COVID, companies obviously need to double down on issues on staffing and management, but they need to double up in making sure that they are open in hiring and being inclusive and diverse, and ensuring that they can, because of COVID, attract, recruit and retain women in their workforce. McKinsey recently found that companies with more than 30% women executives were more likely to outperform companies where this percentage ranged between 10 to 30. And in turn, these companies were more likely to outperform those with even fewer women executives or none at all. A Harvard School of Public Health study found companies with the highest number of female directors on their boards had a 42% greater return on sales. Separately, the CFA Institute found companies lacking board diversity tend to suffer more governance-related controversies than average. So the economic argument is here. It's black and white, clear as night and day. Furthermore, investors know this to be true too. A couple of weeks ago, the Financial Times noted that investor support for resolutions at annual meetings that are focused on diversity, such as calling for companies to report on their workforce inclusion efforts, has soared this year. This is the way the world is moving. Companies and industries must adapt or will die. And we still have more work to do. Scrolling through the Lloyd's list of women in shipping just a few days ago, you have to scroll down quite a long way to find a British woman or a woman without familiar links to the industry. I suspect that this case is the same for aviation and rail. And when it comes to recruiting, we need to have a more innovative approach to hiring than simply asking 10 solid years of experience. How does that account for 2 years of COVID and most of the women in this room holding down their jobs and also managing homeschooling and not going mad? We should take a leaf out of how other industries approach this. They don't ask for 10 years solid experience. Do we think Facebook or Google are asking for this? Yet they're able to float on the exchange for millions of pounds. So we know why we need to encourage diverse hiring, but how do we do it? At this point, I want to pay tribute to the fantastic work of Liz Moskrop, who chairs the Women in Aviation International, Eileen Ginn, Chair of Women in Rail, Sonia Bai, CEO of Women in Transport, and Sue, forgive me, I should know how to pronounce your name by now, Topolowski, founding Chair of the Women in Maritime Network, and of course, Chrissy Clark. If you'll forgive me, because it's International Shipping Week, I'm just going to reflect on what Maritime UK has been doing. Last May, they launched the Diversity in Maritime programme, which aimed to promote a fair, equal and inclusive sector and brings together some of the best minds in this area to help share ideas. And Chrissy and Sue have been working so hard on this. One of the programmes they have is meeting once a year, and this group has offered pragmatic and sensible answers and solutions to the few problems that company has when they come to recruitment. Let's say if you're a small company with 3 members of staff and you want to proactively hire, but you don't have any woman in the company to help you conduct a gender-based interview. Maritime UK has provided a solution through their interview pool. A perfectly matched volunteer will help conduct interview process with your firm, helping you to achieve that gender balance view and get the right candidate on the board. I must say, when I was a minister and now as an MP, if I'm meeting a CEO, I always ask how many women sit on your board and how many women sit on your management team. They always coffee to the coffee because it's the last question they expect to hear. But I'll continue to do my bit and keep pushing that message home. In conclusion, there are many small steps, just like the one I spoke about, that we will continue to campaign on. But forming this group is absolutely critical for all the industries represented today. We need to work together, we need to share feedback, we need to share ideas, and recommendations for other women are also critical. At times, the battle to bring diversity to our boardrooms and can feel incredibly frustrating, but we are slowly winning. We are the first women to take up a number of these positions, so we are fundamentally the change makers. We know we can be persistent, we are obviously all determined, and slowly, hopefully, the world and our sectors will change with us. Thank you.
Huge thank you to Nusrat again for all your continuous support of gender diversity across the transport industry. I'm really now excited to move into our panel session. How we're going to run this today is I'm just going to quickly introduce the panel by name and then going to ask you to delve in a little bit more into the fantastic work that you've all been doing. We'll then go into the first question. A friendly reminder to everyone in our virtual audience, please do turn your cameras off if you're not speaking, but please do use the chat function and we will come to questions as and when possible. And also to those of you in our physical audience today, please do as well. We will then have a slight pause before we move into the breakout rooms. And I'm honestly really excited. We've got some fantastic people running these breakout sessions today. So we're going to have some really great, robust conversations. Well, welcome to my panelists. Thank you very much for joining us. So today on our panel, we've got Dr. Steve Welch, we've got Liz Moskrop, we've got Eileen Ginn, who I believe is with us virtually today. Hello. I don't know which camera to look at, so apologies, I've got my...
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, sorry for the noise. So...
Thank you for joining us. We've got John Manning and we've got Sue Topolowski. So what I'm going to do is to start at the end, if that's all right, and then we'll move to you, Adeline, at the end, and then we'll move to the first question. So, Steve, do you have to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, yes. So I'm Steve Welsh from KTN, colleague of Daisy's. I'm Director of Ideas. Great job title, which I invented. Start there. My normal role is, the whole company is about innovation and about connecting people. And my normal role there is mostly working across all topics, but fronting up towards the emerging research and knowledge that's coming out of universities. I think we're a pretty effective organisation. Others will judge us on that. But we also have a number of initiatives in terms of promoting diversity, which, well, there may be time to talk about later as contributing ideas. But we absolutely, passionately value novelty and difference and creativity. And we know that if we always work in a narrow way with people in our own image, we're not going to achieve much.
Thank you so much. Sue.
Hi, everyone. Well, I've sort of had half an introduction. So I'm Sue Topolowski. I am the chair of the Women's Task Force for Maritime UK and co-chair with Debbie the Diversity Maritime Network. we're passionate, obviously, about getting more women in the maritime sector. It's something that is really almost engraved in my heart if you were to open it. But also, I think now is a golden opportunity of a reset. The industry has been very male-dominated. It has been very traditional. But as we come out of this world, it's a golden opportunity to say, well, why did we do that? Can we do something different? Can we do something better? And my mantra is, how do you ever know you've got the best person if you're only going to 49%? Interview and actually talk to 100% of the population, because women make up 51% in the UK. And it doesn't matter who you appoint, you can hand on heart say, I've got the best person for that job because I've been to the 100%. So that's something we're going to be working on very much going forward for this 12 months. The other thing that I'm really passionate about is making us more normal. You don't say a male carpenter, you don't say a male solicitor. So why are we calling them female seafarers? Why are we calling them female solicitors in maritime? We should just be solicitors. We should just be seafarers. And if we normalise things, then we don't stand out as being different, and then therefore take down some of the barriers to why we achieve. So those are the two things that we're going to be working on. And hopefully with you, we can change, because we need to get to the people that aren't in this room. We need to get to the people that are not on Zoom and get our message out there, because we can't keep talking to the converted.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sue. Sonia.
Everyone, I'm Sonia Byers, Chief Executive of Women in Transport. We're a professional network that supports professional development of women working in the transport sector. We started off very much as a membership network, so providing professional development, networking. In recent years, we launched a mentoring programme, which is entering its 5th year. The LEAD programme, which is a leadership development programme, which launched in April, and we've got our next cohort starting in September. And we're really seeing that make a difference to those women, to helping them succeed and advance their careers and accelerate their careers. What we're also doing is campaigning for greater gender balance in the transport sector as a whole through our APPGs, all-party parliamentary group. And we recently released primary research and white paper showing best practice in research in recruitment, retention, progression of women in the transport sector. So I'm really excited to talk more about the recommendations around that and how we can work together, because what we believe Women in Transport, it's about all of us working together, not duplicating effort, really coming together across the fantastic diversity that there is in terms of the opportunity in transport. I've been working in transport for 20 years and I love it. And I believe that we should have more diversity, more people having the opportunity to come into this great sector. And together, I think we can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now on to Liz, please.
Oh, hello everybody. My name is Liz Mosscrop. I was former chair of the UK Women in Aviation Chapter of Women in Aviation International, and I'm currently sitting on the Communications Committee for the UK Charter for Women in Aerospace, and the Development Committee for the European Business Aviation Association STARS Committee, where we're putting together standards for social inclusion and diversity. And I am thrilled to be in this illustrious group of people. And I think too, as has been touched on, it's wonderful to be involved in all these initiatives. We're also, my day job is I have a video company. So I'm all about visibility and I'm all about communication and languaging. It's so essential. And if anyone is watching now, the quality of what we do here will be informed by the quality of the questions we ask ourselves and the questions that you ask us. So if you're feeling shy about bringing a question in, please don't, because I'm a former journalist, there is no such thing as a stupid question. And it's just, I think we can all learn and share, and some of what's come out of the recent, our recent months is we're able to network and communicate more. We can leverage technology for that. And I'm looking forward to sharing insights, sharing findings, and together we can make this whole wonderful industry. I'm with you on transport, Sonia. I am a private pilot. I love aviation, and it's just so fantastic to being such a great group of people wanting to make the kind of change for the kind of world I want to live in. I'm not crying, I just need a drink of water.
Thank you so much. John.
Hello, everyone, at home and here. I'm going to be looking after more of the mental health side of things today. So I'm a bit of an open book when it comes to my mental health. I'm a bit of a oversharer at the best of times. Professionally, I've been involved in mental health for about 4 years. Personally, I was first in a children's mental health hospital when I was 6. And I had an ongoing kind of interaction with mental health services on and off for 20 years or so, until I got fed up essentially of being in waiting lists, where I was lucky enough to be able to afford to go to the Priory. Has anyone heard of the Priory? Yeah, celebrities. Well, no gossip. Didn't see anyone. They stagger appointments, so they're very smart with it. So 4 years ago or so, I eventually was diagnosed at the Priory with something called bipolar disorder. There's also another few things thrown in there as well, but they're very long, scary words. On the way back from that particular appointment, I decided that I'd kind of been searching for not necessarily a diagnosis for that 20 years, but a way in which I could manage day to day. And achieving that diagnosis didn't have any bearing on my ability to manage what was going on. So let's do a little bit of an experiment. Who knows or has heard of anxiety and depression? Pretty much everybody. People at home, can't see your hands, but I imagine you have. Who knows the 3 methods of recovery for those things? This is where mental health awareness has failed, in my opinion, and I don't want to get too frustrated with it. But that's what I realised on the way back from that appointment. So I quit my job in railway franchise bidding at the time, and I started a company called Arthur Ellis, named after my granddad's. Ellis spent around 36 years in the institute. He had something very similar to me, but it wasn't managed. And we're a social enterprise, so we're a not-for-profit, and we work with organisations. We're running accredited programmes with the BQF, the British Quality Foundation. Their patron is Princess Anne. And over the last 4 years, we've been working with organisations to help them understand that recovery piece and drive that recovery piece and positive well-being, so that people can manage no matter what they've got. And as a result of that, we invest the profits from those programs into community initiatives to provide and fund appointments for children within our communities. So over the last year, 18 months, we've grown 5 times. We've seen around 3,000 kids. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions in relation to mental health, psychology, like I said, I'm an open book. So anything you want to ask, please feel free.
Can you tell us what the 3 are?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Medication, lifestyle, and talking therapies. Lifestyle is the primary one because it's available to everybody, and for businesses, it's free. Medication, it's only really works alongside talking therapies, and talking therapies, when it comes to accessing them in the conventional ways that we typically have accessible to us. When it comes to children, 75% of kids get rejected from the NHS support nationally, very general statistic, but that's around 116,000 kids a year, which is why we focus on that on our one-to-one service. And for adults, 75% of adults who go to the GP, who are directed primarily from employers, can't access talking therapy. So only about 8% of those 75% that try actually get it. So that's why there's a bit of a disconnect between what corporates are doing and the services that are on offer. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And Adeline, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I have to apologize for the bit of maybe background noise and a bit of activity in the background, but today is the day of the Big Rail Diversity Challenge, which is one of Women in Rail's flagship events, which is a cross between It's a Knockout and Krypton Factor, where we have gender balance and diverse teams going head to head in mental and physical challenges for the day. So we did that to showcase the benefit of diverse teams, but also to help change the image of the rail industry into a fun sector, dynamic and full of young people passionate about the industry. So I'm Eileen Ginn. I'm the founder and chair of Women in Rail, which since 2016 is a charity. My day job, I'm a lawyer for my sins, and I'm legal and marketing director and head of EDI at CPMS Aegis. I founded Women in Rail in 2012 following a discussion with my CEO where I was pretty frustrated at the lack of women in the railway sector, and especially in mid-management and senior roles. And since then, it's been an absolute amazing journey, about 100 volunteers and paid volunteers running the charity. We now have 7,500 members in the UK and Malaysia. We operate from 8 regional groups in England and Women in Rail Malaysia. We provide networking opportunities for women in the railway sector. And when I say women, I'm talking about women of diverse backgrounds spanning the 9 protected characteristics. We provide a networking platform for them so they can meet other women, but also men in the sector. We now have an increased cohort of male allies. And one of the key points, of course, is that if you're going to improve gender balance, then men and women need to work together. It's an industry effort, which is why we're called Women in Rail. We called it Women in Rail because this is what the problem is in the railway sector, not enough women, although it's changing now. We also offer development workshops. And to give you an idea, bearing in mind we're all volunteers, during lockdown, we held 50 virtual events in 9 months just to support our members. So networking, of course, well-being, and career planning, but also fun events for women, but also for their kids, to give the women a little bit of a break during lockdown and ensure that the children also had some good memories about lockdown. So as I said, we run plenty of events, networking, workshop. We have 2 flagships events, one of which is taking place today, the Big Rail Diversity Challenge. The other one being the Women in Rail Awards, which is taking place in a couple of weeks to showcase, reward, and celebrate all the men, women, and teams that do a lot to improve EDI and gender balance and diversity and female representation in the UK railway industry. So that's a really special event for us. Pride of us as well is in 2019, we launched SWIFT, which stands for Senior Women in or Formerly in Rail, and their male allies, which is a cohort of senior executives, senior leaders and executives in the railway sector, bringing the career ladder down and helping high potential women and men to climb up the career ladder by giving them support. So we also have a cross-company mentoring program, which is hugely successful, to really create a platform for the conversation to be had on diversity, but also stimulate a better understanding of gender differences, and through that, helping people to expand their network, but also expand their understanding of what other, the differences and the benefits of diversity. And lastly, in November, in partnership with RIA, we launched an EDI charter, the first ever rail industry EDI charter. And within the space of 4 months, we had 170 companies in the railway sector that signed up to the charter. And the charter is therefore a coordinated effort to promote EDI and specifically diversity and inclusion within the railway sector. And as part of that, we've created a working group of 10 individuals, each representing one of the 9 protected characteristics. And we've given them a platform to speak up about the challenges that they face, and give us some ideas and educate us, leaders and companies and individuals onto what we can do to promote gender diversity and inclusion within the sector. So that's been a huge success. And if you look at you may not, but if you look at the rail trade press, you will see a lot of articles from them and workshops. And it's really inspiring to be working with the next generation of leaders, and they're so open and they teach us so much. So it's really, our purpose is really to create that platform for support, but also for a mutual understanding.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us. So we're now going to move into our first question. I'm going to ask the same question to each of the panelists and get your answers. Again, as a friendly reminder to anyone in our virtual audience, please do use the Q&A. We will come to any questions in the chat as we go. Also the same for anyone that's in our physical audience. So the first question: how can we break down barriers for gender diversity, including intersectional considerations? I'm going to ask that question first to one of our allies, on the panel. Steve.
Okay, that would be me. So I can talk most authoritatively only about what we're doing in KTN, but I hope actually there's a few observations we could make. Lots of people have got things to say, I'm sure. But what we find has in creating an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy is that we've learned a lot internally about the people who work for us and with us. And I emphasize that I fully recognize that as a white man of a certain age, there are things I just won't see or won't be able to, I don't mean I can't understand them, but there are some things that I won't see. So as in common with all of my colleagues, we're very keen to learn about this. And one step we've taken is we've created employee networks across the various topics such as race or diversity and or disability or faith. We have a number of these networks set up where it wasn't our idea, we've learned from other organisations who've done this. And these have been very effective at, as well as giving protected groups or other groups within the organisation. We're not that big, it's about 230 people in our company, but it still gives a sense of fellow feeling and gives us as in senior management, if you like, a sounding board or a think tank or somebody that we can learn from in how we change some of or adapt some of our company policies, but also how we address our recruitment.
Wonderful, thank you. Same question to you, Sue.
I think I touched on it slightly earlier. I think we need to take a big button, hit it, and say we're going to reset. As we come out of what we're now in, it is this golden opportunity to say to people and challenge people, okay, we know in the UK, and all the stats this morning said at the moment that we've got record jobs with nobody to fill them. And what we need to be saying to these companies is there's plenty of people that can fill them, you're just not looking in the right places. And I think it's now the time for us to be more vocal. We need to not just keep talking to ourselves. We're great, we love these networks, these are fantastic, but we were always talking to the converted. We need to be bold, as I say, put on my Joan Collins shoulders and go out there and talk to people that don't want to hear me. Talk to the people that are not in this room and make them understand the business case, as Nazrat said. I mean, I did a presentation on Monday for Worcester, and I had 38 reports that prove the business case on the terms of financial, in the terms of innovation, in the terms of a more happier place, therefore you get retention of staff. I'll cite a story in Asia. There was a port, Australasia, sorry, there was a port and they were going to employ their first female crane operator. And then they were going to appoint their first first manager of the port, and both of these positions were women. The opposition they got and the harassment they got, including the port authorities that made the appointment, got death threats, was phenomenal. But luckily, the governor of the state backed them and called it out and said, we're going ahead with this. 6 months later, they had a staff meeting and they said, it's the best place we've ever worked in. We're so happy it happened. And they're the biggest advocates for diversity you will ever find on this planet. So going from death threats to now being absolutely vocalizing about it. They say we have more humor and good humor. It's a better place to work. It's actually thinking about health and safety. We've brought in some great innovations that we never thought about. And having the opportunity to have that mixed thought pattern, they are absolutely advocates for it. But it took a government to stand up and say, no, I'm going to back this. We are going to do it. And I think that's what we need to do. So we now need to be braver. We know the business case for it, it's proven. We know in ourselves, in our own companies, when we do it, it's right. So now we've got to go out and get that message out to the other people, because that's the only the only way we're going to get effective change. And I think this reset pattern gives us the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sue. Same question to Sonia.
Thank you. So I mentioned the primary research and white paper that we did for the APPG, and that was co-authored by our president, Jo Field, and it looks at gender perceptions of working in transport. So both men and women were surveyed, and there's a number of recommendations in the report looking at what we can do as government, what we can do as employers, and what we can do as an organisation as women in transport. And I think we're all in agreement that it's not something we can achieve on our own. It needs everybody. So one of the things we've said, based on the feedback from that survey and based on the insight that we got, is for government is looking at, we've talked about the charters that there are in the industry, aviation has one, maritime has one, rail has one. So bringing together all of those charters and all of the fantastic work in a cross-sector charter and in a cross-sector way, and bringing all those toolkits together so they're in one place, supported by government, supported by DFT, so it can be really powerful and a force for good across the whole of the industry and breaking down the silos. Tackling the toxic masculinity culture in transport. We know from the survey, we know from the anecdotal evidence that 70% of women have experienced harassment of some kind or discrimination of some kind in the transport sector, and that their unconscious bias is still a huge issue. So how can we as women in transport, we're keen to back a project to deliver a toolkit and a campaign to tackle those behaviours and promote a more inclusive culture so that it is seen as a more welcoming place to work for everyone. And also looking at employers, so that recruitment, retention, progression, making sure we know what the tools are, we know what the solutions are, we have those best practices out there, let's implement them. Looking at our recovery, making sure that it's flexible working and there's transparency around flexible working, around pay, that we involve women in the decision making, we involve those fantastic staff network groups in the decision making in our policies, and for government to do that in central policy making as well. And could go on all day about the recommendations, but the final thing I would say is about having targeted interventions where we know that there is underrepresentation and specific disadvantage. So one of the things we're keen to see, we know gender, there are all the different protected characteristics in there. We have programs and initiatives and toolkits out there. So how can we apply that to maybe ethnicity, to disability, and make sure that there are targeted programs to help those specific areas? And how can we use what we've got?
Great, thank you. Liz?
Well, I'm loving what everybody is saying, and I think it's important to have a really coordinated approach. You've got the top level, high level charters, the visibility. That story about the Malaysian crane operator was incredible. And
It's not Malaysia, but yeah, I'm not naming the country because it's not fair.
Oh, sorry, then I missed. But that story was just incredible. That getting that story out there, that message. And what we're doing as a company is we've created a series of conversations out of the pandemic, which we're calling Spark, and we're putting together advisory boards about different underrepresented groups in our industry. So because we're talking about gender here, for example, the Gender Advisory Board, I will probably be calling on all of you to participate actually. It's just pooling knowledge, and we're calling it uncomfortable conversations. So the first thing we'll do is get representatives from different groups and ask for their experiences and say, okay, well, let's put a panel together and let's talk about these experiences and make it visible and invite, like we're doing today, invite questions, invite collaboration, share the findings, because it's just taking that initial first step to say, well, let's spark conversations. What are people's experiences? And one of the things, we're going to interview a CEO of a company who has helped one of his employees to transition, and what that journey, her journey, she was a male to female transition, and sharing that journey in the company, making that a very visible and caring and compassionate journey, really had a great impact on the teams who helped share that journey, and having the support of the CEO and having leadership C-suite level for some of these issues that, you know, as you said, Sonia, I mean, I think a lot of women in the room, I know I've experienced discomfort and experience, and some of it's unintentional as well. And it's like Steve said, it's getting the blind spots out and saying, well, we don't know what we don't know, so let's discover what we don't know, and then how we're going to apply that practically. So for me, I'm excited about being part of this group and sharing our findings, and I think it is going in at different levels, government, within companies, and just getting the conversation started. So yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is being aware of my own unconscious bias, saying every single person who's given me a break in the industry in my career has been a white middle-aged male so far. And I'm very, very grateful. And we've got lots of allies. It's not about pushing people away. I was sharing this before. It's about expanding and including, and being very, very aware that some people's starting point is not as equal as other people's starting point. So it's being that's so crucial, and listening to each other. So at that point, I will shut up and listen to what John has to say.
Thank you. I think one of the things we need to understand is why barriers there in the first place. And I can't really speak from a gender diversity point of view, but from certainly a mental health point of view, a very heavily stigmatized area. I think that there is a lot of stigma to do with areas in society that haven't got readily available access to the support. If going to an appointment for your mental health was exactly the same access level as going to the shop for a light bulb, there would be a lot less stigma in society about it. And I think from an organizational point of view, or panels or any groups that are getting together within the organization, is making sure that you can do something as a result of your work, and that it is signed off before you go into setting up these groups. Because if there is, it's great if you get together every month and talk about things, but if nothing comes as a result, then it begins to chip away at people's hope in the actions that you're trying to take. There's a kind of a psychological principle around that, which is to do with animals and like kind of establishing an alpha, which I know is toxic masculinity and stuff. But if you put two animals in a cage and they fight to try and figure out who's going to be the dominant one within that cage, when the success rate of the loser dips below 30%, they don't try anymore. And I think when you apply that to things like people reaching out for help or people going to their boss for something, as soon as they've tried 3 times, they're at 33%. So if they try again and they're denied again, or that help isn't there for some reason and nothing's being done about it, they're going to give up trying. So I think when I'm embarking on anything like this, ensuring that you have the ability and the sign-off and the funding there available to act as a result of what's discussed and what is identified as poor experiences that need to change, that is a really key way of making sure that you're not putting a barrier up in the first place. So that's what I would say about that. That's helpful.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to go to Adeline as well, and then there's an opportunity for Q&A. So anybody in the virtual audience, obviously, please do feel free to put your question in the chat or raise your virtual hand, same for anyone in the physical room. Adeline.
Well, of course, I echo everything that's been said now, starting at government level, company level, individual level. I would just add that it's also about opening up the dialogue and creating a space for the discussion and a mutual understanding. It's education about gender diversity, which I think is quite important, but also accountability of the leadership. And I think we'll talk about that a bit later. We need to have that accountability, and the way we do it at Women in Rail is by not necessarily the stick, but the carrot. People who are doing incredible work, people who are really making a difference, allies, be it individuals or companies. We celebrate them, we reward them, we showcase them, and that kind of encourage, even if, to talk about the point that was made just now about the 60% failing, they stop trying, through initiatives where we actually pull those people up and say, look, you've tried, what you've tried to do is actually amazing. So bypass maybe the barrier that they had originally. But as I was saying a bit earlier as well, is we have a mentoring program, and the feedback that we have from mentors and mentees are men and women, and on all diversity, has been absolutely fantastic, with some male mentees particularly saying it's complete eye-opener for them as to some of the issues that women face. Now, if you apply that to a much broader diversity level, mentoring is a great way of achieving that understanding, that mutual education. So people understand the business case, but they experience it firsthand. They share stories, ideas inside, they learn from each other, and they evolve their thinking. And I think that's the way we will break down one of the barriers to gender diversity. And of course, we also have, themes, and that's already been mentioned. So I won't go too much into this, but theme workshops, showcasing what diversity means, what it is. For instance, as part of the EDI Charter, as I said, we have a working group comprising individuals representing the protected characteristics. We're giving each of them a platform, and it's absolutely unbelievable. It's amazing what people learn by just listening to them, because unless it's something that touches you, or that you've experienced firsthand, you won't necessarily understand it, because you won't be sensible to it, because it won't be part of something that is, part of your experience. But hearing other people sharing their own views and explaining, giving ideas of how the challenges can be tackled, I think is a great way of breaking down those barriers. But accountability, as I mentioned earlier, I think is key. And as I said, I'm glad that we're going to talk about that later, because for me, that's key. But I'm talking about leadership accountability.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do have a question from our audience, Debbie Cavadaro, who is the co-chair of our Diversity and Maritime Task Force. What is your question, please?
Hi. This is kind of to the panel in general. So I work for Aviation International, which is a trade union for maritime professionals. And we're a big believer in running networks and getting people together. And what I've found, young women and young men are quite keen to join those networks and stand up. But the older women, the women who were the kind of pioneering women, who were the first woman captain, the first woman to go out, the first woman in their class, they very much succeeded by not sticking their heads above the parapet, and being taking on the male characteristics as much as possible. And when you talk to them about kind of joining women's networks, they're quite anti having that, because they're very much, we don't want to stand out. We fought to not be seen as women. We want to be treated like the men. We don't believe in women seafarers being a thing. We just want to be seafarers, and it's quite difficult to kind of make them feel protected within that, and that it's okay to stand up. It's okay to be a female and not have to just wear the shawls and act like a man all the time. And I wondered if the panel, particularly the kind of your general transport networks, if you've kind of found that to be a problem. I see that you're nodding a lot, and that if those women should be more actively encouraged to join networks, or allowed to kind of have that, keep their own view of kind of saying, they want to keep their head down and they want to just keep going the way that they fought to get through.
Okay, which of my panelists wants to kick off that? Sue, can I come to you first?
Yeah, it's a shame Janet Porter's not here, because she actually is typical of that. I fought for years and years and years to get her involved in women's group, and she just felt that she's the best, in my personal view, she's the best female maritime journalist, and one of the top actually maritime journalists we've ever had come out of the UK. She's a phenomenal writer and really understands our industry, and has a network because of the trust she's built, that she can get to any CEO anywhere in the world and interview them. And she would not take part in anything until I set up the Women's Task Force. And I sat down with her and I said to her, look, just come to one event. I'm not asking you to do anything more. I'd love you to be part of my steering group, but just come to this one event. And at the end of that one event, she said, I get it now. I understand. It's about nurturing and helping. It's not about me and my ego and what I feel. I actually thought those were really poignant words, and it made me actually admire her even more than I did before. But that's what it's about. So I think it's about getting the conversation. I don't know about you, but probably when I worked, before I set up my own company, the worst boss I ever had was a female, because she was that atypical person and made me work 20 times harder than anybody else to prove myself, because she felt she had to and she couldn't show me any sort of privilege. So I think it's about talking to them, and if they really are stuck in that way, then it's fine. And don't try and change them. They are their own person. And you know, as much as we're saying about inclusion and diversity, we need to include them. They have equal right to have those views. But those people that we can maybe just help and tell a story just genuinely. You know, Janet will stand up and say she's never had a problem in this industry because she's female. She has never had a door shut in her face. She has never experienced some of the things she was hearing in that room. But once she realised it and went back and asked the question when she went back to Lloyd's List where she worked, she found even young male journalists were saying the same. Yeah, oh, well, you know nothing about this industry. You're an upstart. You've come straight out of university. Mm. So it opened her eyes to something because she had never experienced it. So that's all I can say is we need to be inclusive. We need to accept them. But those that we feel that maybe we can just help on their journey, we can help on their journey and just work that way.
Wonderful, thank you. I see lots of nods around the panel. Sonia, do you mind if I bring you in?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Sue said. I've had lots of conversations over the years, like, why does there need to be a women network? Why does it even need to exist? I've never experienced any barrier to my progression. I don't really feel like that resonates with me. And not just from older women, but from women at different stages of their career, because their experience is different. And different people take different things from these networks and from the support. And all you can do is try and bring them in, but without necessarily saying, it's not about trying to change you or your behaviours or it being a threat to how you are and what you achieve. It's about just come and join the conversation, see the conversation. If you feel comfortable, you don't have to participate in the discussions. Just come and see what it's all about. If it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's absolutely fine. And 9 times out of 10, you'll get a conversion out of it, and they'll find actually it's not such a bad place to be, and I've learned something, or I found something new in it. I found something for me, and that's a win.
Wonderful. And this actually goes in really well now into our second question for the panel, which is around some practical solutions for inclusion. And what are some practical solutions we can share across all of our groups and the sectors? We're going to change this up a little bit, if that's all right, panel. I'm actually going to go to Adeline first, if that's okay, and go down this way. So, Adeline, question for you.
Thank you. Well, I mean, as I said, the practical solutions to inclusion. I mean, Werner Meyer said, diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. So inclusion is key. You can have a diverse workforce. If you don't have an inclusive workforce, you're not going to keep it. So how do you tackle that? And I think to be able to tackle it, you need to understand better what the barriers to inclusions are. And for me, in my experience, there are two. One is a lack of leadership commitment, and then lack of follow through on, the stated commitments. You have a lot of companies, less and less, but you have still some companies that said, I understand EDI, I'm committed to it, but it doesn't actually reflect in a purposeful follow through, a systematic business-led approach to inclusion. So that's one. The second one is some companies tend to overly rely on employee resource groups to drive the EDI agenda, rather than giving their leaders, their managers, true accountability for strengthening diversity and promoting an inclusive culture. Which brings me back to the point I was making earlier, is that if the leadership, the CEOs, the board, are truly committed to creating a diverse workforce and fostering inclusion, and I think a diverse workforce will come from an inclusive culture, it will happen. And that pledge manifests itself through a statement that they're committed, but also accountability. And that accountability means in the performance appraisals, then you make each member of the board and each a senior member of the senior leadership team accountable and responsible as part of their end of year appraisals. You know, you give them goals, they have to follow through, they have to demonstrate their commitments. So I think that that's quite key. And of course, ensure representation of diverse talents. If you do not have that diversity at board level, then look at the next layer, see whether you have it as senior leadership team, and if not, then build up that transparency of pipeline, identify your diverse talent, foster it, and do that completely openly. Have a zero tolerance policy to discriminatory behavior, of course, such as bullying and harassment. Actually build the ability of managers to recognize, to identify and address the microaggression, but also make sure that everyone is comfortable to talk about it. So you create that kind of trust into the statement from the leadership, knowing that they themselves will be accountable. And foster that belonging, have an internal group, educate on EDI, educate on diversity, showcase the good work, showcase the role models, and of course, implement procedures that make it easier for people of diverse backgrounds to balance, for instance, for women to balance work life, home priority, flexible working, shared parental leave. Just have inclusion woven through every single level and layers of your company, and be absolutely, as a leader, happy to be held accountable for any slow progress or any failures and learn from them. So, and that takes courage. And I think a lot of leaders are probably committed to that, but some still are not. But I think that's the way we're going to change it. Everyone knows that change will only come from the top, and I think that's how we can tackle that inclusion. The barriers also improve diversity and inclusion throughout companies, workforces, and therefore industries.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to go to John.
I've been thinking about it, and I think it kind of ties in with the last question and this one. But in order to be practical about the solutions, I think you kind of need to understand about how we develop different perceptions of stuff. And there's a reason why maybe the younger women are getting more involved readily than the older women in those sorts of groups. And if we can understand why that is, we can apply some practical things to it. So we all develop particular channels of thought over time. It's kind of like if I was to say to everybody, alleyway in a gang with hoods, would that be a great scenario to be in, would you think? If you were to go in an alleyway and there'll be like loads of people in hoods there and it's dark? Probably not. So the way that we initially sort of think about those sort of situations is called automatic thoughts. It's similar to if I was to say pay rise, probably like, yeah, go on then. And all people in the room that run payroll, are probably petrifying. So when it comes to how we develop our automatic thoughts, that's done over time. And our brain is quite smart and it invests in the routes, if we're putting it in the transport context. It invests in the routes that have more use. So if you are going towards a situation and the outcome is negative, then that develops a negative synapse in the brain that fires directly to negative. If you always come across positive situations, it's going to fire towards the positive. So for example, when we were young, we probably all ate mud, or we licked a slug, or ran at things we shouldn't have. And then over time, when we realise that that's probably not a good thing to do, we develop that's a negative outcome kind of situation. So a lot of the time, if people do experience something negative, so if you put it in the context of women being belittled or not given opportunities to, they invest in that particular train of thought. So from a practical sense of how we might be able to change those roots in the brain of people who might be embedded in those thought processes, it's still including them in a way that if that group that you want them to join is having some successes, but they don't want to join just yet. You can't really force them. It's completely down to them. But if you share with them those small successes, it starts investing in, the positive route that might be a bit of a dirt track rather than the M1 to that particular situation. And you could begin to demonstrate that things are getting done about this, things are changing, and in turn that will change their thought processes around it. So it's a long game. Like the actual physical change of those synapses takes about 18 months to do. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of seems like a bit of a ramble, but that's kind of what goes on in the brain. So if you can understand that and start drip feeding those positive outcomes rather than, specifically for that group of people who've probably invested in the negative for far too long, you can begin to drip feed those positive changes and help them to see a different way of approaching it.
No, that's fabulous. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, both. Again, I'm just so caught up in everyone's just love the thinking here. To take the last question first, what's going to change? Adelaide just gave us an absolute brilliant list and wonderful, positive initiatives that we can take and need to be taking. And I just go back to the one word, commitment. What does commitment actually mean to leaders? Because commitment, we're all committed to something. And I can say the word commitment. I can say, oh, I'm committed to running the London Marathon. I can say that as much as I like, but unless I actually get up every day and do the training every day, I ain't going to run the London Marathon. And so it's a lovely buzzword. Oh, yeah, we're committed to change, but accountability. And it's just be really simple. What does commitment mean to the leaders? In all of us as leaders, and if we want to stand up as leaders and we're committed to these changes, what are we doing? The quality of the questions we ask ourselves. So, what does commitment look like in your company? It might be, it's a massive, and as John has outlined, if our thought trainers were used to, a few lovely illustrations you've given us, about if we're used to failing, 70% of the time, it takes a lot to get up the 71st% of the time to try and get up and make a change. But if we're really committed, how many times did it take to invent the light bulb? There's a famous quote there, or any experiment. If we're really committed, we'll do it. So even if it's just one action, taking one action with that commitment, saying I am committed to my company being a diverse and inclusive environment for people to work in, then that has to take into account what the leadership roles are. And just to pick up too on the other thing about older women had that and being of that generation too. I know that I've used my gender to my advantage. Being the only female journalist in a room full of men, I stand out, and have stood out and made sure that people knew it. So I did that, but it's about visibility as well, because for some people, visibility is very, very, it's scary. And so being used to being singled out as, oh, look, it's the female fast jet fighter pilot, and you don't want to have to deal with all that nonsense from your colleagues as well as your day-to-day very hard job, then it's quite naturally people may have said, right, I don't want my head above the parapet that way. And it is very much like having those conversations to say, well, what's in it for you? What could be in it for you is lots of us get a lot of value from helping other people. So if you can stand up and be a mentor to someone coming through, maybe that's part of the solution there. So anyway,
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great, Sonia.
So I'm going to talk about some practical things that you can access now and that we know about women in transport. So we've got an advanced mentoring programme that's cross-sector. The mentors are men and women, and applications opened that in October. We've seen that it has made a difference to the women that have gone through that programme. They are seeing more confidence, capability, moving into senior roles, and we're seeing that reverse mentoring, just as Eileen talked about in Women in Rail. So that's one thing. There's the Leadership Development Programme that's open to any woman working in the transport sector. It's a chance for us. We see it as a movement. You're joining a legacy alumni that will hopefully build a legacy of senior women leaders in the transport sector. And honestly, the feedback from our first cohort, I thought it would have an impact, it made a positive difference. 100% of the cohort answered the survey that we sent out, which never happens. Whoever gets 100%, 100% said it exceeded their expectations. And though it's intensive and it's work, and you have to think about it, and it's not a learn by rote, you have to do the work and you have to invest the time in yourself. It's making a difference to them already. The first cohort, midway through the programme, they're stepping up, they're going into more senior roles, they're having secondments, and they're finding support and, you know, realising that they're not the only people experiencing these issues. And it's so important, that support. All of us have these networks. If you're a woman working in transport, if you're an employer, you know, all of these networks are being run, just like ours, by volunteers. If your employers out there, resource them properly, finance them properly. They're coming up with the solutions because they've been frustrated that they haven't existed. Let's support them. If you're really committed, as Liz says, really back them and make it not just a volunteer's job to deliver this change. Another thing you can access, there's the Our Time Toolkit. We know that sponsoring and sponsorship programs really work well. So the Our Time Toolkit is a completely free toolkit. It's open to everybody. It's available on the GLA website. It's got case studies, it's got templates that you can use to implement sponsorship programs in your organisation. And we're also working with bus companies, the D&I Bus Group, sharing best practice. We're looking at building a portal which will share best practice, will be open to everybody with the Confederation of Transport. And it's going to be your life free bus. So, you know, access to case studies from before you join bus, when you're in bus and afterwards. And you know, all of our organisations, we've got fantastic toolkits. I know Worcester and Maritime UK have the Women in Aviation. Look for those toolkits. Look for, if you're a woman working in transport, look for your tribe and the support out there, because that's going to make a difference to your life. And if there are employers out there, you know, look at what's being done already. The solutions are there. Our APG report has got best practice case studies. Look at what's going on there and implement those changes in your business now. There's no excuse.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I love that word tribe. That really does resonate as well. I just love that because it's so true, because it's bringing together everybody and our allies, and you kind of have that support network around you. Sue.
I've got a few things building upon, because I totally agree. I mean, yeah, the toolkits are there. We're passionate about having these free toolkits, talking to people and not being afraid to ask. I think is something probably that all of us, you know, women don't like to ask questions quite often. We feel like we should be the ones supplying the answers. So it's okay to ask. And there's lots of people out there that are quite happy to answer you. So ask. But I want to cite a couple of things. One is some research that KPMG did. And they looked at their graduate programme. And they always had a very high percentage, if not above average percentage, of females that started the graduate programme. And they graduated. But when it got to then looking at the progression in the company, they lost them almost at the first hurdle of actually going into the next level of employment. So they decided there had to be something, and they took upon themselves that there had to be something that was doing this. So they did some research on themselves, which is quite unique, and looked and talked to people and went to the people that they'd lost and asked why, and started to look at it. And they found what a lot of the time was, it's about the males were saying, well, I can do 70% of that, I'll go for it. The females were saying, I'm not good enough, I can only do 80% of this, or I can only do 60% of this, I'm not going for that promotion. They felt not worthy, so they left and went to another job where they felt more comfortable than actually going for an internal promotion. So they came up with a policy, which was they got all their management and their sort of mid-level and said, okay, we know this is an issue. If you honestly believe there is somebody in your team that's female that should go for the role, we want you to go up there and say, have you seen that job on the internal notice board? I think you should go for it. And they worked this out with an NLP expert. the exact wording was, I think you should go for it. And that gave the woman the endorsement level she needed to go and apply, because somebody else was saying that she was worthy. They felt that she had enough to do it. Not that I think you'll get the job, because that's setting forth, but I think you should go for it. And that changed, and they changed their dynamics, and they kept the same, almost the same proportion then afterwards of people going through the company. And it was just a simple thing that all of us can do. And since then, I've actually done it. Somebody I know was thinking about going for a non-executive directorship. And I used those words, I think you should go for it. And they did. So we can actually all personally take that upon ourselves as a simple little thing that you can think about. And not just in work, but that also applies to your football teams, it applies to anything that you think about. So that was something simple, I think, that they learned and was really good. The other things I've written down here is not focus on the numbers. We've all got our charters, and we all start off, and I did the same. I want 1,000 people, I want whatever to sign my charter. What I've learned now is what I want are people that are totally committed to do it. I don't care anymore what number I hit. If I've got 6 companies that are 100% committed to doing it, that is better than 600 companies that aren't. So that's something else is, we all get hung up on numbers, so don't do that. The other thing is about education. All of us in are very regulated industries. By nature, transport's regulated. So one of the areas I'm now looking at is that we have HELM, which is a management training program in the maritime industry that's mandatory by the IMO, so everybody has to take it. It's getting diversity and inclusion part of that training. So every single person that goes through that training starts to get it embedded in them from the beginning. So to them, it's just part of the normal training they're doing. So using our legislative power and also things like health and safety, using these things and bringing it into the training. So we don't stand aside, because I think when we stand aside as diversity and inclusion, we're already alienating ourselves from the company. So let's look at things in the companies and in our industries and in our legislation where we know that it needs to be and start to tackle it. So I'm on a mantra at the moment, and I've now just got myself on the MCA's Helm Review Committee on board, and hopefully I'm now going to be able to bring that in, and those are the sorts of places I think you need to be. And in LSW 2017, I managed to get a pledge to start off the Maritime UK Women's Task Force. In LSW 2021, I want us to see if we can do a transport inclusion index, where all of us start to work together to have one index sitting under the DFT, where we can look across ourselves about true inclusion. Because I think if companies then start to see this index and ask why we're not there, we will start to do it. So I would like to see out of today and Friday an absolute pledge by all of us to work together to go to DFT and say we want an inclusion index.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Steve, I'm going to come to you, and then I've got a couple of questions that are just coming in through the chat. So Steve, to you, and then we'll go to questions.
Okay, well, I'll keep my remark brief. I do have a practical suggestion. Obviously, I've been listening to the panel and seeing my room to manoeuvre shrink. But if I may, I'd like to build on something that Sue mentioned there. And actually, you've sort of made it okay for me to go into an area I don't want to generalise in, but my observations would support the idea that generally, when given an opportunity, whereas a man would trend towards saying, I'll never go with that. I've got those bits, I'll blag the rest. A woman is more likely to say, I haven't got, I wouldn't be a strong candidate, or just that act of slight degree of self-effacement there. And a very practical, simple thing to do. And I also want to credit a woman called Lucy Standing, who runs a company called Brave Starts, who works a lot in this area. But if you can get a woman to shadow someone for a day, and what they do in Brave Start, I'm not trying to sell their organisation, I'm making a general point, but the way they do it is they sort of broker and set up for people to do 1 or 2 days, just shadowing somebody doing the role that they're interested in. it transforms their interest and their confidence in it. It sort of touches on what you were saying about, I think you should go for it. Sometimes the act of just following someone around and seeing what they do, it will change your perception of a role and make you think, well, I could do that. Also, I've got this to contribute. So I'm become quite an evangelist for this idea of creating the work shadowing. So obviously it's nothing like as intensive as an internship or there's room for all of these things, but that simple act of creating opportunities for people to come in and observe how roles work could be very powerful.
Wonderful, thank you. George, White, in our virtual audience, I can see you've got a question. Are you happy to put yourself on mute, off mute, not on mute, off mute, and put your camera on, please, to ask your question?
Yes, hi everybody. I'm enjoying the event. Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
Great. I'm an IMO Goodwill Maritime Ambassador, and they're saying I can't put my video on because the host has stopped it. Okay. One of the programs that we have found very successful is called Adoptership. And it may be similar to what we used to look at back maybe 100 years ago when there was snail mail between children in the classroom, sending messages to people on board the ships in the Navy and the situations like that. We've had the program running. I'm involved in the maritime industry, obviously. We've had the program running successfully in Cyprus since 2006. And shortly after I became ambassador, I took the program to India and the Philippines and shared it with the children in the schools, orphanages, and shelters in those areas. It consists of a seafarer, usually the captain, exchanging an email with the teacher or the head of the orphanage or shelter, the administrator, once a week. And we give the children a world map and the exchange between the captain and the teacher, where they give them the coordinates and they answer questions back and forth about it. And it's been very, very successful. I've spoken about it at the United Nations and they've endorsed it. The IMO Secretary General has been to one of the classrooms and seen it and endorsed it. It's totally free, easy to set up. And in India, I've contracted with the International Women Seafarers Foundation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. Obviously, a foundation for women seafarers. And one of their founding members is Captain Radhika, who won the hero, the award for bravery in the IMO. So this is a very strong base of people in there. But with the women side of it, we're able to ensure that we get into a gender neutral side. And as you talked about, getting this confidence from a level when they're a child builds up these successes. So when they have some challenges going forward, they'll have a bit more resilience. It's a program that's totally free. I've given you the website there, but anyone can do it. Don't you need permission with it? You just contact the schools, orphanages, or shelters and line up something with the maritime community so they're able to communicate with it. The results have been amazing. We've put a lot of young people from underprivileged backgrounds are already on ships from orphanages and shelters and in the schools, regardless of the standards. Some of them are very high standards, some in basics. They've all benefited from it. So it's something that we can all do. I applaud your efforts. I work with Worcester and different countries around the world, and I try to share that information. So congratulations on what you're doing. We need a lot more help in shipping. We're probably under 1% of women seafarers on non-passenger ships. And we're trying to do what we can to change that and provide equal opportunities for them, not just on board ships, but in all aspects of the maritime community. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you so much. And we'll certainly make sure we share that out. I've had also a few requests for the toolkits. We will absolutely make sure that we send those links out if we're able to do so. So we will do that after the session. I just also had another comment that came in from Susan Polly Holden about currently only new seafarers complete helm. Therefore, we need to look at how the legacy seafarers are captured, and that's certainly something we will be looking at. And I will embarrass her, but Susan is the first female captain of the RFA and has recently won the Merchant Navy Medal for her work for gender diversity. So we would all like to say a big congratulations to Susan. And now we're going to go into the breakout rooms. So I would like to say a personal thank you to every single one of you on the panel. And Adeline, in our virtual room, we're very, very grateful to you all. So now we're going to be moving to the breakout rooms. So we've got 5 virtual breakout rooms. We've got one focusing on what is an ally and how to be an ally. We've got one around sharing best practice, focusing on engagement with young people. We've got one focusing on getting into senior roles and encouraging seniority. We've got one around mental health and well-being, and John will be leading on that conversation. And we've got a really, really fantastic one around ethnicity and race. So this is where the technical bit all happens. For those of you in our audience, our virtual audience, you can choose the first breakout room that you want to go to. The first one is going to run for approximately 15 minutes. We'll then bring you back into the main room, and then you can choose where you want to go to for your second one. If anybody has any problems or any technical issues, please feel free to private message us at Maritime UK in the chat. But hopefully you will all be able to go and choose your virtual room, and we'll give you a bit of a countdown and bring you back. So away you go. Virtual breakout rooms. Apologies, we had a bit of tech to sort out. It's the joys of this hybrid way of working at the moment. Thank you so much to all the leads. We just want to hear a little bit about what you talked about in your rooms. So I'm just going to call out a lead's name, and if you're happy to give a wrap up. So Debbie, over to you.
Hi everyone. So I didn't have any note takers in my room, so it was just me, and I didn't take any notes. I just chatted. So this is a bit of things that I remember. So please do comment in the chat if I've forgotten something vital that somebody said and I've completely forgotten it. So we had a lovely chat. My room was how to be a good ally. We talked a lot about kind of the languages that people use, and a lot of mention was made of, for those of you who weren't at the meeting yesterday, for the calling it in video on the TED Talk on calling it in that we had. So if you haven't seen that video, I highly recommend you having a look at the TED Talk on calling it in rather than calling it out. And that's kind of what we were talking about of how to call out or call in people when they're doing things, and the differences between how to challenge that language and how to challenge men's attitude, particularly with women in shipping. We talked about the kind of problems that people face and particular examples of things like things that happen to you when you're a junior employee and you don't have the power particularly to be able to challenge language or behaviours, but as you rise through the ranks or as you get a bit more seniority, being able to suddenly say, actually I don't find the language or the attitude acceptable, and I didn't find it acceptable when I was a junior. It's just I was unable to call on it at the time. We also talked about the fact that this meeting and meetings like it, whenever we're talking about any kind of diversity issues, suddenly it turns out there are a lot of women in maritime, but when you're at meetings discussing the environment or shipbuilding, you're the only woman in the room. And how do we engage men and other people into these conversations so that people who aren't affected by any sort of discriminatory aspects can understand what it's like for those people who are in those areas, and saying, no, just because it's never happened to you doesn't mean it's not happening. And then our kind of final takeaway was about all of us checking our language at all times and making sure that the words we use and the language we use and the attitude that we use are the same for whoever we're talking to, and that you don't have one set of language when you're talking to a female, or one set of language that you're talking to juniors. And I said, I'm probably as guilty of that as anybody, because I certainly have an attitude that I take when I am now talking to kind of older white males in maritime. I expect them to have a certain attitude, and that's not fair on them and any more than it is on them having an attitude for me being a female in maritime. So it's about kind of understanding where you're coming from and where those other people are coming from, and giving everybody the opportunity. And thinking that everybody's got good intentions at heart, and a lot of times that when men particularly are calling me feisty or sweet, they don't actually mean to be offensive. They genuinely think they're being complimentary, and it's it's for me to kind of explain to them why I might not find either of those words particularly things that I want them to take away. So that was our chat.
Cool. Thank you so much, Debbie. And we really hope everyone enjoyed that breakout session. So next, I'm just going to ask Daisy just to give a wrap up on her room engagement with young people.
Wonderful, thank you. And yeah, it was really interesting to have these conversations. I think the three main points that came out of our rooms, we have a major skills gap in all of our sectors. We have a skills gap in rail, we have a skills gap in maritime, and we have a skills gap in aviation in the context of we need more people coming into our industry. And, you know, we did talk about how we can reskill and we can upskill and we can, you know, pinch people from other sectors, but ultimately we need more people. And that does mean that we have to actually start the process now. You know, it isn't something that's optional. It isn't a nice thing to do, as diversity and inclusion has kind of been maybe a nice thing to do historically, and in certainly some areas and some companies, but now it's crucial for us in our sectors to make sure that we continue to grow and thrive. I think another point was we need to start at a younger age than we are currently. So we need to get into, you know, schools, we need to get into where young people are before they've started to choose their options and their career paths, because young people are choosing, you know, around 14 or 15 years old now, if not sooner, what they want to do in terms of their pathway, whether that's training, university, you know, whatever other options that there are that they might want to take. We need to make sure that we're getting in at an age where we can still influence their decisions towards us, obviously. And then the last one is, there is a real issue that young people simply don't know what careers are available in our sectors. So there was one study in the UK by DFT, and it was asking young people what careers they knew of in aviation. 81% said they knew about pilots and cabin crew. So that's missing quite a lot of the sector and quite a lot of the people that have to work, you know, to make aviation function on a day-to-day basis. And similarly for rail, in my experience, when I've asked young people what jobs are there in rail, the man that drives the train, and it's always the man that drives the train, the person that checks the tickets, occasionally someone who works in a station ticket office, and that's it. So how do we really spread that knowledge around what careers and jobs there actually are, and what that, you know, what that means for young people in terms of their career path, their finances and everything else?
Thank you so much for that, Daisy. That was fabulous. Thank you again, everyone that joined that room. Jill, Ashley, Becky, if you're happy to talk about senior roles and progression, that'd be great.
All right, I'll kick off, and Jill and Becky can add if they wish. I think mentoring was definitely an overriding theme that we saw within the breakout sessions. Both in terms of, you know, thinking beyond the traditional sort of having a mentor, looking at options to perhaps have more than one mentor, and thinking about the breadth of the mentors that you can look to have. You know, think of different industries where you might be able to get different perceptions which help you grow and improve your skills. Becky talked a lot about the importance that she had in terms of opportunities to shadow different people as part of her career, and how that had driven different influences for her. So that was a really core theme that came through. I think aligned to that, networking was something that we talked about, and the different tools and opportunities that we've all experienced, and how they can help drive particular growth opportunities. We talked quite a bit about change management in one of the sessions as well, and how to tap into different resources, and again, circling back to how mentors can help really understand different scenarios of change management and the types of leadership styles that were presented as part of the problem solving aspect there. And I think just generally being self-aware of, you know, what we've done, what we have achieved. We know there's still lots more that we can do as individuals and as groups. So how do we reflect on that, and how does that influence how we drive things forward? I don't know, ladies, if you would add anything else.
I'll just add one thing, which is things move on. You know, the job titles move on, the opportunities move on. It's sort of like our job to keep up to date with understanding what the possibilities for our careers are. And I think the whole networking and mentoring piece, the whole asking for perspective, just I view it a bit like a kaleidoscope, really. If we keep turning our mind over what we understand in our context and what the options and possibilities are, we find more. With the help of other people, we find more. And I think it's been one of the most rewarding things of running the Women in Transport Leadership Programme, LEAD, seeing these women participants create more options and possibilities for themselves on how their career could develop and how their aspiration could be met. So go for lots of input. That's my thought. Do you want to add anything, Becky?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? It says I'm not allowed to use my video. The host suppressed me because I'm doing that good old virtual working from home. But if you can hear me, I will talk. So just a couple of things. I wanted to sort of say thank you to those who managed to join our breakout. We did have a couple of technical problems, but thanks for bearing with us, and just pull out a couple of things that people contributed. So Helen spoke about actually from scratch having established her own employee network for gender, and I was massively impressed. She's already got to 10% of her organisation signed up, whether it's male allies or female. So just pay tribute to her, because I think those are the sorts of things that have a real impact actually and really help in this space. And then I loved what Temi said. Actually, we spoke about how, you know, having being aware of our own personal impact, and actually Jill was managed to share a great survey. I don't know whether we can put that in the chat, but Temi's described it as, do we all know what our own superpower is, and then we can leverage that appropriately. And I love that. I'll maybe leave that with a reflection for all of us. What's your superpower, and how can we use it to help senior roles and fellow women getting into senior roles and building that pipeline?
Cool, thank you so much. That sounds fabulous. Is there anything else Joey wants to wrap up on?
Yeah, I'll put the two links in the chat now. One is for a free strengths tool and the other is for a free values tool, and they can help you just get more familiar with your superpowers and what's important to you. So I'll put that in so that everyone can see it now.
Perfect. I think that's a great message for everyone. I tell you, I definitely want some superpowers, so keep passing this way, please. Thank you so much. All right, I am going to now move to John, if that's all right, to wrap us up on the mental health and wellbeing.
Hello, everybody. I'll try and be as quick as possible because I know everyone's probably got a lot more to do in their day. But we had a few technical issues getting in as well. I also had to climb like 9 floors or something, whatever it was. So thanks for bearing with if anybody was on the first one that missed out. I've said it to everybody who was in our breakout rooms. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and have a offline conversation about anything at all, professional, private, whatever it is, then just please reach out. We covered, I think in one of the breakout rooms, it was kind of a need for a bit of a framework around mental health and well-being, because I think I outlined a little bit of my gripe with the industry, that it's just so overcomplicated, that there's so many different factors and different things. So we covered a general framework that we use at Arthur Ellis, which is essentially facilitating and encouraging 5 particular types of behaviours. And it's also building that into actually developing your staff skills in these areas. So that is exercise, we call it move. Focus, which is all about drawing attention and having periods of time that ground us and keep us in the present. Discovering new things, so that's about learning and reflecting and reviewing. Communication, and helping others without the expectation of return. So those 5 areas of behaviour develop a well-being strategy. And then we had a look at the kind of challenges that people have doing that within different environments that they might be in. And it became apparent that a lot of the environments that everyone works in these industries is extremely small. So when it comes to actually exercising, it's really, really difficult to do. And it builds in a lot of different barriers and challenges. So whether there's worthwhile having particular areas for that on, in the working environment that people are used to. And then one of the primary things that we covered was the communication aspect, where isolation and loneliness are different, but very, very similar. So the way that I have a look at it is isolation is the very immediate thing. If we're isolated for too long, our social skills drop, and that leads to long-term loneliness. If we're unable to have appropriate social skills, we aren't building and maintaining effective relationships, and long-term we'll be lonely. So I think certainly as a response to some of the situations that people have been in over the last 18 months or so, there should be a bit of a drive to demonstrate and help provide social skills, whether it's training or just tips across the industry, so that people can get back on track, because it contributes to around 20% of everyone's well-being. So there was also that, specifically to women, there's not a lot of representation at like C-suite level, but at the same time, women aren't even interviewing for those kinds of positions in the first place. So really mirrors that getting in early at the school level. But also, one of the things you can leverage these 5 areas of behaviours, and I'm not going to go into it because for a start, I'll sound like a manipulative mad scientist. But when it comes to developing skills, if you're looking to drive motivation, confidence, self-esteem in a particular community, and if we're talking about young women looking at options for workplace, that links to our discover, we call it a banana, discover banana. So if you are looking to inspire, build confidence and self-esteem for people to start interviewing for CEO level positions in a particular area, you want to do some learning and discovery piece around that. So if there is any female CEOs out there that might want to do something to do with their discovery, teaching, learning around what it's like in those positions, that's going to drive interviews into those C-suite positions. So they're the sort of things that we covered. Yeah, cool. Right. Thanks. Don't know how to finish.
Thank you so much. Perfect. And certainly, last but no means least, can I move to Cecilia, Samar, and Julie, please?
Hello, welcome from the Race and Ethnicity and Transport breakout room. We really enjoyed talking to people, and we picked up loads of things that sort of resonated with us. So the bits that we will remember long after we've left today are things like when we're looking at disparity in maritime, class always seems to be at the foreground, and it sort of pushes gender and ethnicity and other kind of diversity issues to the back. Data is the key. You've got to have the data. It's not just about who's on your board, but how much time are they being given to speak. And so there was a little sort of boost there that said, if you feel like you're only being asked to speak because you're the token female speaker, just say yes anyway. They may have asked you for that reason, but now they have to listen to you, so more fool them. The third bit that we came away with was, how do you re-energize yourself when you're kind of dealing with disinterest or defensiveness? How do you re-energize yourself? We sort of, what was the thing that sort of resonated with us the most?
I think it was Temi who'd said, when you're hearing no all the time, you're applying for jobs and you're just getting no. It's about re-energizing yourself and thinking, how can I turn that negative energy into something positive? And you said that no doesn't always mean no. It can mean yes to a new opportunity instead. It's quite a nice take on it.
We really like that. That all made us smile. And then the last bit that will kind of stay with me, I think, for some days is we talked about leadership. And how do you have leaders who really want to face the bleak reality of it and not just pay lip service to it, and not just give you a one-day D&I seminar? And how do those of us as leaders make sure that we're not just paying lip service to it. And this, I think we'd like to leave you with. So Damien Hooper-Campbell, who is the D&I lead for Zoom. He was in a different position, actually. He was working for Amazon at the time, but he said, when you think of D&I, companies very often are intimidated and think that you have to throw a lot of money at D&I. And he had leaders, mainly senior leaders in the room, and he asked them to think back to a time in their life where they were excluded, whether it was not being invited to a party in your childhood, whether it was being not asked to speak in the boardroom, or whether that might have been, sitting on the bench for the whole of the 4 matches that your team were playing, for example, and to hone in on the sentiment that occurred when you were excluded. And then he asked them to each go back to their companies and decide what type of leader did they want to be. Did they want to be the type of leader that that fostered feelings like that for their employees, or did they want to be the type of leader that did the complete opposite and enthuse them and invite them in and enable them to be their true selves? Thank you. And that's it from us. And we would like to welcome all of you to join our Ethnicity and Maritime Network. We're not just here for today, we're here for life. So please come and join us.
We certainly are. Thank you so much. Well, just to wrap up, a humongous thank you to our wonderful panelists, to everyone that led the breakout rooms. A huge thank you to KTN for partnering with us to make today happen. Obviously, our fabulous sponsors, to the Baltic Exchange and to Norton Rose Fulbright, and to Diversity and Maritime Programme sponsors, Aberdeen Harbour Board and Stena Line. We're delighted to have this as our first summit. This certainly will not be our last. And we're just so excited to have so many of you participate. Apologies again for any technical things we had to work through, but that is the way of virtual working. But how fantastic that we can have sessions like these and bring together people from around the country and also outside the country as well. So we hope it's the start. We will be sharing this recording. We will be doing a wrap up. But thank you so much all. And we're now going to be closing the Zoom. Thank you. Take care. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Invite the people upstairs to come down. Chrissy?
I've already done. Yeah, I've done it through the chat.